At her own wedding reception, they removed Amara's chair from the head table and offered it to the woman her husband used to love. Not quietly, not in confusion, not by accident. In front of 280 guests, under chandeliers made of hand-cut glass and warm gold light, Celeste Ross lifted the ivory name card that read, Amara Reed Ross, set it down beside a champagne flute, and smiled at the woman in deep green satin. "Bianca, sweetheart," she said, with the smooth confidence of somebody who had mistaken power for permission. "Come sit with the family. You know where you belong." The jazz trio did not stop right away. The waiters kept moving between tables with trays of sparkling water and smoked salmon canapés. The photographer, who had spent the evening asking people to tilt their shoulders toward the light, kept smiling because he assumed he was watching a strange family ritual he did not understand. But it was not a ritual. It was a humiliation. And in the center of it stood Amara, in a fitted ivory gown with pearl beading at the waist, one hand resting against the table, the other still holding the stem of her untouched glass. For one suspended second, the ballroom seemed to split into two separate worlds. On one side, there was luxury, applause waiting to happen, perfect floral towers in black vases, polished silverware, wealth arranged carefully enough to look effortless. On the other side, there was a bride watching her place disappear, while the man she had married less than an hour earlier sat frozen in silence. Damien Ross looked first at his mother, then at Bianca, then at Amara. And still he did not stand. That was the part she would remember later. Not Bianca smoothing her dress before she sat down. Not the whisper from table 9. Not even the soft scrape of the chair being pulled into place beside Damien. It was his silence. The silence of a man who had every chance to protect her and chose comfort instead. Amara lowered her eyes once. Only once. People often think a woman breaks loudly. They expect tears, raised voices, ruined mascara. The kind of public collapse that gives other people a story to carry home. But some women do not break where the audience can see. Some women become still. And stillness, in the right person, can be more dangerous than outrage. Amara set her glass down. Then, with calm fingers, she slipped off her wedding ring and placed it beside the folded linen napkin at the seat that was no longer hers. She did not look at Damien. She did not ask Bianca to move. She did not plead with Celeste. She simply turned, lifted the hem of her gown, and walked out of the ballroom. Nobody stopped her. The large double doors closed behind her with a soft, expensive hush. Outside the ballroom, the corridor was quiet, except for the muted hum of the air conditioning and the distant pulse of bass from the band still trying to save the mood inside. The carpet beneath her heels was midnight blue with a gold geometric pattern. On the wall beside her was a framed black and white photograph of the building as it had looked almost 80 years earlier, back when the hotel had been called the Bellamy House. Amara leaned one hand against the wall, not because she was weak, because she wanted the cool steadiness of stone under her palm. Then she reached into the small satin clutch hanging from her wrist and took out her phone. There were 17 missed messages already from bridesmaids, cousins, event staff, and one from Damien that read, "Please don't make this bigger than it is." Amara stared at that sentence for a full 2 seconds. Then she opened a number saved under a single initial, N. The call was answered before the second ring. "Ms. Torres speaking." Amara's voice was level when she replied. "This is Amara Okonkwo. I need executive confirmation on the Riverlight Grand, effective immediately." There was silence on the other end. Not confusion, recognition. Then the woman's tone changed. "Ms. Okonkwo," she said, with the kind of quiet respect that belongs to old institutions and older truths. "Are you authorizing under full legal identity?" "Yes." "Do you want me to alert hotel operations and general counsel?" Amara looked through the glass panel in the ballroom door. She could see Damien still seated beneath the floral arch, his mother leaning toward him, Bianca smiling too carefully now that the room had begun to sense something was wrong. Amara answered softly, "Yes." "And Nia? Suspend all courtesy privileges tied to the Ross family account until I review them myself." This time, the silence on the line held weight. "Understood," Nia said. "I'll begin now." The call ended. Amara slipped the phone back into her clutch and stood alone in the hallway, wearing a wedding dress and a face so calm that if anybody had seen her then, they would have mistaken composure for emptiness. They would have been wrong, because behind that calm was a story Damien Ross had never fully known. A story even Celeste Ross had been too arrogant to imagine. Amara had not grown up with chandeliers or ballroom receptions. She had grown up in Savannah, in a narrow brick house near East Broad Street, where the porch rail needed repainting every spring, and the magnolia tree dropped heavy petals onto the front walk like little folded notes from heaven. Her mother, Lena Reed, had been a school librarian, with a voice so gentle it made children confess things they had never planned to say out loud. Her father, Ade Okonkwo, had been harder to explain. Not because he was absent, because he was careful. He moved through the world like a man who understood the price of visibility. He wore dark suits without logos, flew coach more often than first class, and gave to charities through shells of names that did not point back to him. He taught Amara how to read people before she learned how to drive. He told her that money made noise only in the hands of insecure men. "What matters," he used to say while buttoning his cuffs in the hallway mirror, "is not what you own. It is whether what you own can survive your silence." Amara was 21 when he died. A stroke, sudden, clean, merciless. After the funeral, lawyers came and went, but very little was explained to her directly. She was told that certain business structures had been placed into protected family governance. She was told there were disputes. She was told there were reasons her name had been shielded from public filings when she was a child. She was told the world her father had built was larger than she realized, and far uglier behind the curtain than it looked from the front. Most of all, she was told this: if she wanted her life to be her own, she could live quietly under her mother's surname until the day she chose otherwise. So she did. Amara Reed, not Amara Okonkwo. Not the daughter of a hospitality investor whose companies quietly held interests in landmark hotels, redevelopment properties, and cultural venues across 3 southern cities. Just Amara Reed, a preservation consultant, a woman with thoughtful eyes, sensible shoes, and a tendency to care more about restoring old buildings than impressing new money. That was how Damien met her. At a charity dinner for neighborhood restoration in Atlanta, where everybody else was trying too hard to look important, and Amara was crouched beside a display table, fixing a warped architectural model because the side wall had started leaning outward. Damien had laughed softly when he saw her. "You know," he said, loosening his tie a little, "most people come to these events to be seen, not to repair the decorations." Amara glanced up without smiling. Then most people are less bothered by structural weakness than I am. He loved that answer. Or at least he loved the version of himself that got to stand beside a woman who spoke like that. Damian Ross had the kind of charm that made rooms rearrange themselves around him. Tall, smooth-voiced, expensive watch, easy grin. He was never the loudest man in the room, which made him seem deeper than he really was. He knew how to ask questions that felt intimate. He remembered birthdays. He complimented intelligence in women, which many men mistake for proof they respect it. At first, he seemed different. He sent coffee to Amara's office after long zoning hearings. He asked about her restoration projects. He listened when she spoke about old black neighborhoods being erased in the name of luxury, and called her work important in a way money can't fake. She believed him because he sounded sincere, and because sincerity is often convincing when it arrives on schedule. The Ross family, however, had their own language. Celeste Ross, Damian's mother, was a woman made almost entirely of polish. She wore restraint like couture. Her smile never arrived by accident. Her praise was always shaped in a way that reminded you it could be withdrawn. At first, Celeste liked Amara, or rather, she liked what Amara appeared to be. Graceful, educated, attractive in a restrained way. No loud family, no tabloid history, no visible ambition to dominate the room. To Celeste, Amara seemed manageable. That illusion lasted until Amara started saying no. No, she did not want a 12-car bridal motorcade. No, she would not invite developers who had displaced tenants from the same neighborhoods she worked in. No, she did not think wedding footage should be sold to a lifestyle magazine. No, she would not let Bianca Hale attend dress fittings for old time's sake. Bianca, always drifting at the edges. Not because Damian wanted her, or at least not in any open way, but because some women are never fully removed from a family system that still believes they were the better social fit. Bianca had dated Damian for nearly 3 years. She had vacationed with the Rosses, hosted their donor lunches, remembered their anniversaries, laughed at the right moments, and never challenged the architecture of their power. Celeste loved that. Bianca knew how to belong without demanding respect. Amara, by contrast, had the irritating habit of expecting dignity as a baseline. The first crack appeared at an engagement dinner 6 months before the wedding. Celeste had arranged a private meal at a members-only club downtown and spent most of the evening praising Bianca's social intelligence while asking Amara whether preservation consulting was more passion than profession. Damian apologized on the drive home. She doesn't mean half the things she says. Amara looked out the passenger window at the city lights sliding across the glass. That doesn't make the other half harmless. He squeezed her hand and promised he would handle it. He did not. That became the pattern. Small insult, private apology, no correction. Then another insult. The wedding planning months were full of velvet-covered disrespect. Suggestions disguised as standards, opinions disguised as experience. Celeste changed floral decisions without asking, moved guest placements, added Bianca to the bachelorette brunch under the pretense of maturity. Damian kept smoothing things over with that soft male weakness some women are taught to mistake for peace. Baby, you know my mother. Yes, Amara thought more than once. That was the problem. She did know. And she also knew something else. Men who refuse to confront disrespect are not neutral. They are benefiting from it. The corridor outside the ballroom remained empty for almost 3 minutes after Amara's call. Then the atmosphere shifted. Not visually at first. Operationally.
Two men in discreet dark suits turned the corner, scanning the hallway with the alert precision of senior hotel security. Behind them came the hotel's general manager, a silver-haired woman in black evening tailoring with a tablet held against her chest. When she saw Amara, she stopped immediately. Her posture changed, not dramatically, professionally. "Ms. Okonkwo," she said. The use of that name in that hallway sounded like a lock clicking open somewhere far above everyone else's understanding. Amara turned toward her. "Yes? I'm Evelyn Price, General Manager of the Riverlight Grand. Ms. Torres contacted us. We've prepared the Founder Suite if you'd like privacy." Founder Suite. Not bridal suite. Not a courtesy room. A room the Ross family had no right to name, much less control. Amara nodded once. "Thank you." The security staff moved with silent efficiency. One took position near the ballroom entrance, another disappeared toward the elevators. Somewhere behind those doors, the celebration continued under the mistaken assumption that humiliation had already won. It had not. Inside the Founder Suite, the city spread below in ribbons of gold and dark glass. The room smelled faintly of sandalwood and polished cedar. On the coffee table was a leather folio, a bottle of still water, and a slim black card embossed with the crest of Okonkwo Legacy Hospitality. Amara had seen that crest all her life. A crowned riverbird above 3 lines of water.
Her father used to tap it with his finger and say, "Never build where you cannot improve what came before you." Nia Torres arrived within 25 minutes. She was in her late 50s, elegant without effort, hair pulled into a low silver bun, a woman whose authority had outlived the need for display. She had worked with Ade Okonkwo for nearly 20 years and had known Amara since she was still small enough to swing her feet under dining chairs. Nia did not begin with sympathy. She began with facts. "The Ross family booked tonight under long-standing preferred partner privileges," she said, opening the folio. "Those privileges exist because Damien's father once helped broker a tax package for the Midtown expansion. They do not survive your review if you choose to end them." Amara sat very still on the sofa. "What else?" Nia slid 3 documents across the table. "The Riverlight Grand sits under a parent structure where you hold controlling voting authority once activated. The same applies to 2 event properties, 1 private members club, and a minority position in Ross Commercial Leasing through legacy debt conversion your father negotiated years ago." Amara looked at her. "Damien never knew?" "No." "Celeste?" Nia's mouth tightened with something like contempt. She knew the Okonkwo name. She did not know she was seating the owner's daughter behind her son's ex. For the first time that night, something moved behind Amara's calm. Not triumph. Recognition. The kind that comes when the final shape of a person's disrespect reveals itself. She rose and crossed to the window. Below, the valet line curved around the illuminated entrance where luxury cars slid past one another like polished lies. Amara spoke without turning. "I don't want a scene." Nia answered quietly. "Good. Scenes help the shameless recover. Structure does not." That sentence settled into the room like truth. Within the next hour, several things happened inside the hotel. None of them loud enough to count as spectacle, and all of them sharp enough to change the night. The Ross family's penthouse access was flagged for manual review. The bridal expense ledger was transferred out of courtesy status. The private after-party lounge reservation was placed on administrative hold. And the executive note attached to the event file read only this: "All future privileges subject to chair review."
The first sign of trouble reached the ballroom when Damien's cousin tried to escort a group upstairs for the after-party and found the elevator refusing the access code.
The second came when Celeste requested an additional bottle from the owner's cellar collection and was informed, gently but firmly, that the account authorizations had changed. The third came when Damien finally found out that Amara had not gone home. She was still in the building, in the founder suite. He stared at the manager in disbelief. "The founder suite?" he repeated. Evelyn Price met his eyes with the smooth expression of a woman who had decided professionalism mattered more than gossip. "Yes, Mr. Ross." "That room isn't available." "It is tonight." "For who?" The manager folded her hands. "For Ms. Okonkwo." Damien frowned. "I think you mean Amara Ross." "No," Evelyn said. "I do not." By the time Celeste learned where Amara was, the ballroom no longer felt celebratory. It felt observed. Guests lowered their voices. The band packed up between sets faster than necessary. Bianca stopped smiling the moment she realized the staff's attention had shifted away from her. Celeste went upstairs anyway. Of course she did. Women like Celeste believe rules are negotiations until a door closes directly in front of them. When she reached the private floor, security stopped her before she could approach the suite. "I'm the groom's mother," she said, as if that title outranked the architecture of ownership. "I understand," the guard replied. "This floor is restricted." Celeste's face tightened one disciplined inch at a time. "Restricted by whom?" The guard did not answer. He did not need to. Downstairs, Damien kept calling Amara. She let the phone vibrate. Once, twice, 8 times. On the 9th call, she answered. He sounded half panicked, half offended. "What is going on?" Amara's voice was even. "What should be going on is that you should be asking why your mother took my seat at my own wedding and why you let her." "Amara, please, you know my mother can be dramatic." "Your mother was not dramatic tonight, Damien. She was deliberate." He exhaled sharply. "Fine, she crossed a line. I'm saying that. She crossed a line. But why is the hotel acting strange? Why won't anybody tell us anything?" Amara looked down at the city lights. "Because this is no longer your evening to manage." "What does that even mean?" "It means," she said, "that I'm done being handled after I've been humiliated." He was silent. Then he tried the old softness. "Baby, let's talk privately." "We are talking privately." "No, face to face." Amara's hand tightened around the phone for the first time. "You had your face-to-face chance when they moved my chair." She ended the call. The next morning, the Rosses hosted a farewell brunch in one of the lower garden salons, though by then, the word hosted was generous. Their overnight confidence had eroded into brittle smiles and overdressed anxiety. Several donors had left early. 2 local councilmen had canceled. The social media team Damien's cousin had hired to capture the wedding weekend aesthetic had quietly disappeared before sunrise. At 10:17, while servers poured coffee and tried not to look at anyone too directly, the doors opened. Amara walked in, wearing a cream blazer, dark trousers, and gold earrings no larger than raindrops. Her hair was swept back. No wedding gown, no veil, no visible devastation, only precision. Behind her came Nia Torres, General Manager Evelyn Price, and a young attorney carrying a leather case. Conversations stopped in layers. Celeste rose first. "Amara," she said, summoning a smile so cold it almost clinked. "We've all had a very emotional evening. Morning, Amara corrected. Then she turned to Evelyn. Would you like to proceed? The manager inclined her head. Certainly, Ms. Okonkwo. That name landed in the room like cut glass. Damien stood up too fast, chair legs skidding behind him. Bianca, who had somehow decided to appear at brunch after all, stared at Amara with the expression of somebody suddenly aware she had sat in the wrong seat in more ways than one. The attorney opened the case. Nia spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. As of 11:42 p.m. last night, Ms. Amara Okonkwo exercised controlling review authority over the Riverlight Grand under Okonkwo Legacy Hospitality. Effective immediately, all preferred privileges, discounted event considerations, and partner hospitality accommodations attached to the Ross family account are suspended pending governance review. Nobody moved. Nobody even reached for their coffee. Celeste's face did not collapse all at once. It tightened in stages, the way expensive fabric resists tearing until it cannot. This is absurd, she said. There must be some misunderstanding. Nia looked at her with polite finality. There is no misunderstanding. Damien stared at Amara. Okonkwo? He said, as if the syllables themselves had betrayed him. Amara turned her eyes toward him at last. My father was Ade Okonkwo. There are names that rearrange rooms. That was one of them. Even Bianca knew it. Her expression gave her away first. The Okonkwo holdings were not flashy, not loud, not tabloid famous. They were something far more durable. Quiet ownership, historic acquisitions, luxury properties restored instead of gutted. The kind of legacy money that did not need television, because it already had contracts. Damien's voice dropped. You never told me. Amara's answer came without heat. I was going to tell my husband. That man never made it to the reception. A sharp silence followed. Not one guest looked away. Celeste recovered first, because women like her train for survival inside public embarrassment. If this is about last night, she said, surely you don't intend to punish an entire family over one emotional misunderstanding. Amara looked at her with a steadiness that made the older woman seem over-decorated and very small. No, Celeste, she said. What happened last night did not create the problem. It revealed it. Then she took one step forward. You did not remove me from a chair. You removed me from your version of acceptability the moment I stopped performing gratitude for disrespect. Celeste opened her mouth. Amara did not raise her voice, but the room belonged to her now. You wanted a bride who would smile through insult, host your guests, overlook Bianca, and call it maturity. You wanted a woman who would mistake access for belonging. Damien tried once more. Amara, please. She held up one hand. No. That one word, spoken quietly, carried more authority than all his apologies combined. The attorney slid several papers onto the nearest table. Operational notices, he said. They included revised event balances, immediate review of partner terms, and a formal statement that future Ross family bookings at Okonkwo-controlled properties would require board-level approval. No threats, no screaming, no theatrical revenge. Just paperwork. The kind that outlives emotion. Amara signed only one page that morning. A temporary governance directive authorizing broader review of any discounted vendor or venue arrangements that had been extended to Ross-affiliated businesses. The pen moved smoothly between her fingers. Damien watched it as if the sound of ink touching paper might still somehow be stopped if he wished hard enough. It could not. When she finished, Amara closed the folder and handed it back. Then she looked at Bianca. She did not insult her. She did not humiliate her. She simply said, "You can keep the chair." Bianca's face burned crimson. "Amara, But there was nothing useful to say. Because some women discover too late that being chosen in the wrong room is not a victory. Amara turned and left the garden salon without hurry. No one followed her. Not at first. The aftermath was not explosive. It was structural. That was what made it devastating. The Ross family had built much of their social power on relationships, concessions, and hospitality access they had mistaken for entitlement. The Riverlight Grand had hosted their charity galas at favorable rates. A members club under Okonkwo management had quietly admitted several of their business partners. A redevelopment warehouse Damien's brother used for event logistics sat on land tied to a legacy lease nobody had reviewed in years. Once those cushions disappeared, reality became expensive. Within 3 months, the Rosses were not ruined. They were simply ordinary. And for people who have lived on preferential treatment, ordinary can feel like a collapse. Damien left Amara voicemail after voicemail. The first were ashamed. The second, defensive. The third, wounded. Then came the honest ones, which are often the hardest to hear because they arrive after consequence, not before it. Amara listened to only 2. In one, he said, "I didn't know who you were." In the other, he said, "I thought there would always be time to fix it." She deleted both, because the first sentence was never a defense, and the second sentence is what weak men say when the moment requiring courage has already passed. Amara did not spend the next year becoming vindictive. That was not her inheritance. What she did instead was more difficult. She took her seat properly. Not beside Damien, inside her own life. She entered the Okonkwo governance meetings in navy suits and quiet heels. She reviewed files her father had protected for years. She learned which properties had been sustaining neighborhoods and which were drifting toward the same glossy predation she had spent her career resisting. She kept the holdings, but she changed the posture. Historic black-owned businesses received longer lease protections. Community arts centers gained stabilization grants. 3 properties that had been marked for luxury conversion were redirected into mixed-use neighborhood plans with resident protections written into the contracts. For the first time, Amara understood that wealth by itself was not legacy. Stewardship was. That mattered more to her than the hotels, more than the boardrooms, more than the moment in the garden salon that people across Atlanta whispered about for months afterward in softened voices over brunch and donor dinners. The bride who owned the hotel. That was what they called her when they thought she was not within earshot. They missed the point. She had never needed to own the room to deserve respect inside it. What happened at the Riverlight had only exposed how cheap the room truly was. 6 months later, Damien came to see her. Not at a hotel. Not at a gala. At the preservation studio, where she now split her time between development reviews and community restoration work. He arrived on a rainy Thursday, wearing a charcoal coat and the face of a man who had finally run out of rehearsed confidence. Amara almost refused to meet him. Then she thought of something her father once told her after a contractor lied to him in a negotiation. "Closure is not mercy," he said. "Sometimes it is inspection." So she let Damien in. He looked around the studio slowly. Framed neighborhood elevation drawings hung on the walls. Samples of reclaimed wood sat on one table. On another were proposals for small business facade repairs, in a part of the city most investors preferred to ignore until it became profitable. "You built all this?" he asked. Amara shook her head. "No, I protect it." He sat only after she gestured once. For several seconds, he said nothing. Rain traced soft lines down the windows behind him. Finally, he looked up. "I loved you." The words hung there, stripped of their old confidence. Amara folded her hands. "Maybe," she said, "in the way you were capable of loving someone while still needing your mother's approval more than her dignity." His eyes dropped. He had no reply, because there was no honest one. "I was wrong," he said at last. "Yes," Amara answered. "No cruelty, no comfort, just fact." He swallowed. "If I had known." She stopped him gently. "That is still not the sentence you think it is." He closed his mouth. And in that silence, perhaps for the first time in his life, Damian Ross understood exactly how small his idea of love had been. They spoke for only 15 more minutes. He apologized properly once, not for losing access, not for the hotel, for the chair, for the silence, for letting the room decide what she was worth. Amara accepted the apology the way one accepts the weather, as information, not restoration. When he left, she did not cry. She stood by the window and watched him cross the street alone, shoulders bent slightly forward against the rain, and felt not triumph, but distance. Distance can be holy. Distance is sometimes the first true luxury a wounded person gives herself. Celeste Ross never apologized. She sent 2 messages through mutual friends requesting a private lunch as women who understand how public moments can become distorted. Amara declined both. Some conversations are not invitations to truth. They are attempts to recover elegance after cruelty has been witnessed too clearly. Bianca disappeared from the Ross family orbit within weeks. Last Amara heard, she had moved to Houston with a consultant, whose name changed depending on who was telling the story. That did not surprise her. People who attach themselves to borrowed power rarely stay to watch the debt come due. A year after the wedding, the Riverlight Grand hosted a heritage preservation gala under new community initiatives funded in part by the Okonkwo Board. Amara attended, not as a bride, not as a scandal, as chair. She wore a black silk gown with a structured neckline and no necklace at all. Her name on the printed program read Amara Okonkwo, plain and final. When she stepped into the ballroom, the room stood, not because she demanded it, because now everyone knew exactly whose ground they were standing on. She gave a brief speech that night, not about betrayal, not about Damian, not about Celeste or Bianca or the chair. She spoke about restoration, about what it means to save a building without stripping away the people whose memories made it worth saving. She spoke about dignity in neighborhoods and in women, about how too many institutions ask the vulnerable to be grateful for being merely tolerated. At one point, she paused and said, "The test of power is not whether it can embarrass the unprotected. It is whether it can make room for them without demanding silence in return." The room did not clap immediately. It listened first. Then the applause came all at once. After the gala, Amara took the elevator alone to the top-floor terrace, where the city opened in gold and black beneath the night. The same city that had once watched her walk out of a reception stripped of a seat and a husband. The same city that now knew exactly who she was. She stood at the railing for a long time, In her coat pocket was the wedding ring she had picked up later from a sealed hotel envelope after the Ross account was closed out. She had kept it for 12 months, not out of sentiment, but because endings sometimes need to finish aging before they can be released. She took it out, held it between finger and thumb, watched the terrace lights flicker across the band of gold. Then she set it down inside a velvet jewelry box she had brought for that exact purpose and left it with the concierge to be donated, melted, repurposed, whatever the jeweler recommended for unclaimed ceremonial pieces. Not every symbol deserves a shrine. Some only deserve completion. By spring, Amara had expanded her preservation studio into a foundation that paired design grants with small business stabilization in historically black commercial corridors. She named it the Lena House Trust, after her mother. No billboard campaign, no giant portrait in the lobby, no personal branding package, just work. That was the part people never understood about women like Amara. They imagine that once power arrives, it must become visible to count. But the deepest kind of power often becomes quieter. It no longer needs applause. It no longer needs permission. It no longer confuses being admired with being safe. One Saturday afternoon, during a youth mentorship workshop in Savannah, a young girl with bright eyes and tight braids looked up from a drafting table and asked her, "Ms. Amara, were you always rich?" The room laughed softly. Amara smiled. Then she answered with the kind of truth children deserve. "No," she said, "but I was always worth respect. I just learned that some people can only recognize value after it removes itself from their reach." The girl nodded as if she understood more than adults usually do. Maybe she did. That evening, after everyone left, Amara sat alone on the porch of her old childhood house. The magnolia trees still leaned toward the walkway. The porch boards still sighed in familiar places. The air smelled like summer grass and rain-warm brick. She thought about that night at the Riverlight. The chair. The silence. The phone call. The room full of people who believed humiliation could reduce a woman's worth if enough eyes witnessed it. They were wrong. Her worth had never been in the seat. It had never been in Damien's defense. It had never been in Celeste's approval, Bianca's embarrassment, or the room's shifting loyalty once ownership entered the conversation. Her worth had been older than all of them. It lived in her mother's gentleness, in her father's caution, in every building she had fought to preserve, in every time she had chosen not to become cruel simply because cruelty had found her first. That was the inheritance. Not the hotel, not the holdings, not the quiet authority to review accounts and suspend privileges with one phone call. The inheritance was discernment, the ability to know when a room is asking you to shrink, the courage to leave before it teaches you to call that shrinking love, the discipline to answer disrespect not with spectacle, but with clarity. They gave her wedding seat to his ex because they thought place was the same thing as power. They thought belonging could be redistributed by the cruelest person at the table. They thought silence meant weakness. They thought a calm woman must surely be an empty one. They were wrong about all of it. Because some women do not need to shout to change the architecture of a night. Sometimes all it takes is one decision, one refusal, one quiet phone call. And if this story leaves anything with you, let it be this. The people who humiliate you are not qualified to define you. The room that disrespects you is not your kingdom. And the moment you stop begging to be treated properly by people committed to misunderstanding your value, you make space for a future they were never capable of imagining for you. Amara did not win because she owned the hotel. She won because when disrespect finally introduced itself without disguise, she believed what it showed her. And belief, in the right woman, becomes exit. Exit becomes distance. Distance becomes clarity. And clarity, once claimed, can rearrange everything.